I'm Helen Hargreaves and I'm Head of Payroll Policy here at MBKB, and I do these updates regularly. This one has been scheduled in the calendar for, well, since about Christmas time. Never did I expect that it would have such a lot of new information in it. We always knew that this was going to be the last one before the start of the new tax year. What we didn't know is that Rishi Sunak was going to throw quite so many curveballs as he has done this week. And in fact, even overnight, more information has been coming out. So for those of you that are on this session now, because you had originally planned on joining the session on the 7th of March, and then we had technical issues. Well, that was a happy accident, actually, because there's so much that's different now from what I would have told you on the 7th of March. So welcome to the latest information. Now, we can do questions as we go along. So you can either pop your questions in the chat box, or we have time at the end for you to ask questions. Or if you would prefer, you can email me your questions after the session. I'll put my email address in the chat box. In fact, I'll do that now. helen@mbkbgroup.com. And if you have any questions, then you can always email me directly instead. I will warn you though, today of all days, I woke up with a sore throat. So if I do get a little bit croaky and end up taking a drink, well then please do forgive me. But that way then I'll get through to the end. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn my camera off and let's get started on the session. So this is the payroll legislation update for the things that you need to know to start the tax year 22-23. Like I say, this was always a planned session, but what we didn't realise that everything was going to change quite so near to the start of the tax year. It's really cutting it fine, to be fair. So we are going to start with the ongoing COVID support, or rather that probably should more be the going COVID support, because there's not going to be a right lot left. And then we will look at the budget changes, whether that's budget announcements from last year that take effect in 22-23, or whether that's an update from the spring statement from this Wednesday. Then we'll look at what that means for income tax and national insurance, the rates and thresholds that are going to be in force, student loans, national minimum wage. Just look at what changes are coming in for statutory payments, pensions, and then a look ahead. So I just want to give you an idea of what to expect, not for 22-23, but what is going to be hopefully starting to be decided, regulations laid so that they can come in hopefully the start of the following year. So let's look at ongoing COVID support first of all. So we know that from the beginning of the pandemic, March, April 2020, the government suspended the waiting days for COVID-related absences. So there still had to be a period of incapacity for work, so someone still had to be off at least 4 days. But if they were off for 4 days, then SSP was payable from day one. That ended yesterday. So from today, the 25th of March, the normal rules apply again. But this is only for Great Britain. Now, for those of you that remember your geography, you'll remember that Great Britain is England, Wales and Scotland, and Northern Ireland is not part of Great Britain. It's part of the United Kingdom, but it's not part of Great Britain. And the social security rules in Northern Ireland are devolved. They have their own social security regulations. and they have taken the decision that they are going to retain that suspension of waiting days for COVID-related absences. So if you do have workers in Northern Ireland as well as in Great Britain, then you're going to have to make sure that you and your software is aware of the different rules. So Scotland, England and Wales, we're back to SSP for whatever reason they're absent. SSP is payable from day 4 because the 3 waiting days are in force. SSP for Northern Ireland, if it's a COVID related absence, then it continues to be payable from day 1. The SSP rebate scheme that we had, so small employers could claim back up to 2 weeks of SSP for each employee that was off for a COVID related absence. That also closed. That closed on the 17th of March, and the deadline for submitting those claims was yesterday. So if there are any claims still to go through, it's too late now, I'm afraid. The tax relief for home working. Tax relief for home working has always been available. As someone who's worked from home for years, I can tell you it did used to be quite complicated putting through that claim. If your employer paid you the home working allowance, then that's absolutely fine. It used to be £4 a week, it's now £6 a week. And if you get that, then that's absolutely fine because there's no tax on national insurance implications at all. But if your employer doesn't pay that, then you used to claim tax relief on the actual expenditure, and that used to be quite tricky to work out, well, how much of the electric bill is purely there because I work from home. So we are now able to claim tax relief on the allowance amount, so you can claim tax relief on £6 a week, and that is going to continue moving forward. If you work from home, you can claim for tax relief even if you've only worked for 1 day in the tax year, but you can't claim if you have chosen to work from home, and that might be a little bit of the rub now that we're coming out of the lockdown. Life's getting back to normal, people are going back to the office, but yet now we've got much more hybrid way of working. However, we can claim tax relief on £6 a week, which is £312 a year, because that's 52 times £6. And that is much easier than trying to keep track of the extra costs that you've incurred over and above what you would have incurred if you'd been working in the office, especially now because the bills are going to be racketing up so much with the energy costs rising and everything. Trying to prove how much your bill, the extra on your bills is due to you working at home, it's going to be nigh on impossible, I think. So it'd probably be easier to just claim the tax relief on the £6 a week or £312 a year. I would say we do have a question here that says, if someone works from home due to a disability and the office environment is not accessible, would this still qualify for the allowance? Well, you've got two issues there really, because really the employer should be making it accessible. You've got the DDA, and employers do have responsibilities towards workers. But that being said, if we look specifically on your question, if someone cannot work in the office because they can't get in, then that's not a choice in my view. So it would still apply. I would like to think that actually the employer, if they haven't made the necessary adjustments to the workplace to allow that worker to go in, then I would like to think that they would actually pay them the £6 homeworking allowance instead, and then they wouldn't need to go through that claiming of the tax relief because they're just getting the £6 a week anyway. But either way, there is no choice there, I don't think. So I would say that that would be quite all right to go down that route. Now, one that is going to catch people out if we're not careful, as I've just said, people are moving forward, going back into the office. If people have been provided with equipment while they were working from home during lockdown, what happens to that equipment or how it has been provided could have an impact on whether or not there is going to be a tax charge, because the government introduced an easement so that employer provided home office equipment was not considered to be a benefit in kind during the COVID pandemic. And the easement that was introduced ends at the end of this tax year. So where we are at the moment is that if when the employee started to work from home, they ordered themselves an office chair. No, my husband did, ordered himself an office chair, so that it's properly ergonomic and he can work at home. If someone does that and the employer reimburses the cost of that chair, then there is no tax on national insurance implications. In that case, there's no change of ownership. The employee ordered the chair, the employee paid for the chair, and the employer reimbursed it, but there is no change of ownership. It's still the employee's chair. If at the start of the pandemic, the employer said, "Oh, right, take your chair home, take your footrest home, take whatever else home," and we're now all starting to go back to the office. So you go back to the office and you take your chair back and you take your footrest back. And again, the employer provided it, but now you've taken it back to the office. No change of ownership again, because it's always been the employers. They've lent it to you to use at home, and now you're going back to the office, you're taking it back with you. But if the employer provided equipment at the beginning of lockdown and said, right, take your chair home, take your footrest home, and now they say to you, do you know, it's too much hassle, just keep it and we'll get you some new. All of a sudden, you've got a change of ownership. It was the employer's chair and footrest, and now they've given it to you. They've told you to keep it. So there is a change of ownership, and so that would be considered a taxable benefit. So if you're starting to think about the next round of P11Ds or whatever, then this is something that your employer needs to know about, because there could well be a taxable benefit if they don't account for that equipment in the right way. Cycle to work easement. Cycle to work is one of those schemes where there is a great benefit attached to having a bike through the cycle to work scheme, but there's a condition attached, and that is that the bike must be used primarily for commuting. And of course, when lockdown started, no one was commuting anywhere, or hardly anybody anyway, it depended on your job, but very few. So most of the people with a cycle to work arrangement were not able to fulfill one of the main elements of that benefit. When we had the second lockdown in December 2020, because we thought that, oh, well, it's fine, we're all starting to come out of it, everything's fine, and then we got locked down again in December 2020, the government introduced this easement to say, okay, then we recognise that during the pandemic, you've not been able to use your bike and fulfill that requirement of using it primarily for commuting. So if anybody has had a bike under the Cycle to Work scheme before 20th of December 2020, then you weren't to know when you got that bike that you were not going to be able to fulfill the main condition. So it's fine, we will bring in this easement that says you don't have to. And that easement lasts right through until the 5th of April this year. So from the 6th of April, that element has to be back in the equation again. They've got to be using the bike for commuting. However, if you had somebody who joined the Cycle to Work scheme after the 20th of December 2020, i.e. we were in lockdown. You got the idea of how this works now, and you can't go out and you can't go commuting. Then that means that you got a bike with your eyes open. You knew what the circumstances were going to be. So in that case, those people, if they still don't use the bike for commuting, they will get a tax charge. But everybody else got caught out, if you like. So the easement does still apply to them. So one exemption that is remaining is for employer provided COVID tests. Now that is whether either the employer pays for the COVID test directly or reimburses the employee who has the COVID test. The was an exemption so that it wasn't considered a taxable benefit, and that exemption was due to end on the 5th of April, so that from the 6th of April onwards it would be a benefit in kind. However, remember, free COVID tests are being phased out. Now that top bullet is a wee bit woolly, simply because in England and Wales they're phased out from the 1st of April. In Scotland they're going to be towards the end of April. So we just know it's April sometime, but either way, at some point very shortly, you're not going to be able to get a free COVID test. So because of that, this exemption, where if your employer pays for it, is not going to be a taxable benefit. That gets extended through until the 5th of April 2023. So we've got another year of this exemption, which is a good thing. So let's now look at the budget changes, the reason why you're all here today. So what we got told last year has already changed. So last year we were told that certain values were going to be changed for 5 years. This slide has changed this week. So where are we now? Where we are now is that the personal allowance, the higher rate threshold, and the pensions lifetime allowance, they will remain at the values that we have at the moment, the 21-22 values, for the next 5 years until 2026. I say that with a little doubt in my mind, just because you can see there's a bullet that's no longer got any text next to it, because that has already changed this week. So something that we've been told was frozen is no longer frozen. And frozen for the next year is the apprentice levy offset allowance and the apprentice levy percentage. So the offset allowance of £15,000, which every employer gets, which means that only employers with a pay bill of more than 3 million actually have to pay any apprentice levy. That's staying the same. The percentage it's charged at, 0.5%, that stays the same. There was also another bullet on there as well, which said that the employment allowance was frozen until 22-23, but that has changed this week too. So what did we find out this week? We now know that the primary threshold for national insurance is going to increase to £12,570 from the 6th of July. So we are going to have 3 months at £9,880 and then the rest of the year at £12,570. As I've already mentioned, the employment allowance is increasing to £5,000 from April, so that's from the start of the tax year. And the basic rate of income tax is going to reduce to 19% in 2024. But remember, income tax is a devolved issue. So this reduction to 19% applies to England and Northern Ireland as it stands at the moment. And we will wait and see what Scotland and Wales decide to do about that. So how does that pan out? So from the income tax perspective for this coming tax year, I haven't had to change this slide. from what it said at the beginning of the week. So we know the personal allowance, 12,570, which is what the national insurance threshold will go up to align with. So from July, they will both be 12,570. The personal allowance income limit of £100,000 has remained unchanged. One that has changed, the married couples allowance, that has gone up to 9,415. It sort of feels a little bit arbitrary, that, because there'll be very, very, very few people that, if any, that are actually claiming that, because to claim the married couples allowance, you have to have been born before April 1935, which would make them about 87. I'm not sure if anyone's got any 87-year-olds working for them. There will be some, but not many. The marriage allowance, which is where we can transfer part of the tax allowance from one partner to another, that's available to those people that are under 87. That has remained the same. That's £1,260, and the blind person's allowance is up to £2,600. So that's just summarising the thresholds weekly. Their personal allowance is 242, monthly 1,048, and we already know what the annual allowance is. So the income tax rates and bands for RUK, for those of you not familiar with that term RUK, it means rest of the UK. So essentially what it means at the moment is England and Northern Ireland, because Scotland and Wales have the power to set their own tax figures here. But that being said, Wales, very happily for us at the moment, has said that it's going to align with the rest of the UK. So these figures actually apply to England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and it's only Scotland that has set its own figures. So Scotland's starter rate, basic rate and intermediate rate have changed. The higher rate and the top rate are unchanged. So the Scottish Government is trying to help the lower earners through their tax rates, but the higher earners, it has remained unchanged. So the one that we're actually all wanting to look at, national insurance. So I'm going to leave you in suspense for a little bit longer, because I'm going to talk first of all about the health and social care levy. So in the government's usual style, last autumn, they announced that the way that they were going to start ploughing more money back into the NHS and into social care was by the introduction of a levy. However, given that it was in the autumn, there was absolutely no way that payroll software would be able to make all the necessary changes to be able to work it through in payroll. So what the government said is, for this first year, because we are starting to pay it from the 6th of April, but the way we pay it, we're going to have an interim way, which is from the 6th of April, our NIC rates are going to increase by 1.25%. That's going to last for a year, and then next April, the NIC rates will revert back, and the health and social care levy itself will be introduced. There is going to be a slight difference between what happens this year and what happens next year, and that is when it comes to those overstate pension age, because at the moment, those overstate pension age pay zero rate national insurance, and the 1.25% increase on national insurance does not apply to them. So those who pay 0% will pay 0% this coming year as well. It won't be increased to 1.25%. But that being said, from April 2023, they will be liable to pay the levy. Anybody who is working will be paying the levy. The employment allowance and NI reliefs are still going to apply. The levy contribution must be shown separately on the payslip. To soften the blow, the government thinks that if we have a message on our payslip that explains why our national insurance contributions have gone up, then there will be less agitation across the workforce. So they have asked employers to include a message on the payslips that says 1.25% uplift in national insurance funds, NHS health and social care. Just to remind us why RNI is more. Now, the next slide I just wanted to include just to explain exactly how much more we are going to pay, because it's been bandied about that there's national insurance is increasing by 1.25%. So there could well be quite a lot of the population, quite a lot of your workers who've got this idea in their head, well, my national insurance is going up by 1.25%. It's not really a right lot, really doesn't matter, I can live with that. But that's not the case. It's the rate at which they pay national insurance that is going up by 1.25%. And in reality, that means that the national insurance contributions are going up nearer to 10%. So I've just included a very, very basic example in here, and you will get these slides afterwards because they will be on the website. So if you need to, you can use this to explain to your workers later. So if we look at somebody who has an annual salary of £25,000 each month, that's £2,083.33. Under the current thresholds that we have now, and the current rates obviously that we have now, that means that someone's monthly NIC would be about £154.36. Next year, from the 6th of April, using the new thresholds. Now, bearing in mind, this is the thresholds that will apply on the 6th of April, not what will apply on the 6th of July. I'm just going on April for now. So with the thresholds and the percentage in force on the 6th of April, their national insurance contributions will go up to £166.99. So you can see there's a bigger difference there than 1%, and you might maybe just need to be able to explain that to your workers. Now, we do have a question on the chat about interested to know others' opinions on the request for the payslip messaging. I know that there are a few people that do not want to include this message because they feel that the government is using them as political puppets to try and make their case for them. What we don't know is how many are actually going to include the message. I know some payroll softwares are including it. I don't think that they all are. We've got another comment that says, the way I look at it, it's going from 2% to 3.25% over the threshold. So really, it's a 60% increase. Yes, you're quite right. It is for those higher earners. Yes, you are quite right. It is nearly a 60% increase. I don't know if anybody else has got any comments about Laurie's question about how does what do others feel about being asked to include this message. The only thing I can say is that it isn't mandatory, and I'm sure that there are some employers who will not include that message on it. So let's look now at the national insurance relief for employers who employ veterans. The government again did its thing. It announced this in the autumn of 2020 for an implementation of April 21. And again, that's not giving payroll software enough time to put the functionality in there. So whilst employers employing veterans in the first year of employment in tax year 21-22, when it is supposed to apply, they are actually at the moment paying that national insurance, and then they can claim it back at the end of the tax year, and they claim it back through the EPS. From the 6th of April onwards, we will have a new NIC category, category V, so V for veterans, we get that one makes sense. and it applies when employing veterans in their first year of employment. Now, there will be many veterans who may well have left the forces, the armed forces, maybe years ago, but because of a physical or psychological injury, they haven't yet taken up a civilian employment. They may well be going through rehabilitation or whatever. So there is no time limit to when they left the forces to when they take up their first civilian employment, and their employer then becomes eligible for this relief. What qualifies them? Well, they must have served at least a minimum of 1 day in the regular armed forces. That can even just be basic training. And it has to be their first civilian employment. You will not, as an employer, be advised by the government or anybody else that this is a veteran in their first civilian employment. You are reliant on being able to look at the employee's work history, their forces service card, and it's up to you to establish if this is their first civilian employment. You won't get told by HMRC. The period of relief lasts from 12 months from the day they started their first civilian employment, and that first day is set in stone. So even if they start working for an employer and it really doesn't work out and it's not for them, so they move on to a second employer, that second employer can continue to benefit from this national insurance relief. They don't need to pay national insurance on the contributions up to the veterans upper secondary threshold, but the date remains fixed in stone as it lasts up to 12 months from the day they started their first civilian employment. They might have had 2 and 3 in the first 12 months, but it ends the day before they started their civilian employment a year ago. So if they started on the 1st of May, it will end on the 30th of April. We have a new threshold. It's a veterans upper secondary threshold, or a VUST, which happily for us mirrors the UEL, the upper secondary threshold, and the apprentices upper secondary threshold of £50,270. So that's great. Everything matches up. The one that doesn't match up is free ports, because we also have an NIC relief that is coming in for employers who set up or have a site in a free port. So the first thing we need to know is, what's a free port? A free port is might be near an airport, might be near a seaport, could be even a river port, and they have incentives, enterprise zones to stimulate economic activity in those areas. The employer must have a physical site in a free port. You can't just think, oh, I fancy a bit of that, I'm going to say I'm over there, when really you're not. They have to have a physical site. And employees have to be new hires from the 6th of April onwards. And those new hires, those eligible employees that you can claim this relief for, must spend at least 60% of their working time within that free port tax site. This national insurance relief ends after 3 years, so 36 months after the employee started work. Now then, we start to get a bit more complicated, because we've not just got one national insurance category, we've got 4, mirroring more the standards that the rest of us have. So for category A that the rest of us are on, that would then be category F if they were based in a free port. You've then got I, which is for the married women and widows who pay the reduced NI. You've got S for those above state pension age, and employees who can defer because they're already paying national insurance in another job. Employers will pay no national insurance contributions on their earnings up to the free port upper secondary threshold, the FUST, but it's £25,000. It is not the same as the other upper secondary thresholds or the UAL. And now we've got a little bit of a curveball here, because especially for apprentices. So if we've got apprentices listening to this call, when you go through your exams and start to do your manual calculations, you have to use this FUST, this Freeport upper secondary threshold, when you are going through all your manual NIC calculations, regardless of whether this employer happens to be in a Freeport area or not, and regardless of whether it's primary or secondary national insurance. Because you might think, and in fairness, I think most of us did, well, what's it got to do with primary anyway? Because it's a secondary NI relief, really doesn't matter about the employee themselves. But we've checked it out with HMRC. All manual calculations must include earnings between the primary threshold or the secondary threshold and the FUST, and then from the FUST to the upper secondary threshold of the UAL or whichever applies. Regardless of location, regardless of whether it's employee or employer. That's how the software is going to be working it out. So for the rest of you that don't have to worry about this because you did your exams years ago, all you need to know is that your payroll software is also using the FUST for when it's conducting all national insurance calculations. Most of the time it doesn't make any difference because most of the time it will come out the same, but not always. Every now and again it's just out by a few pennies one way or the other. The employment allowance is increasing to £5,000 from the 6th of April. So eligible employers, that's those with secondary national insurance of less than £100,000 in the previous tax year, they can reduce their annual national insurance liability this year, 22-23, by up to £5,000. All the other rules still apply. So connected companies, you've got to look at your combined earnings, decide who's going to get the employment allowance. You need to submit a claim each year because obviously your NI contributions could well have fluctuate from year to year. And this one was a curveball for payroll software providers as well. So virtually everybody here will have already had their updated software ready to start for the new tax year. So you're just going to have to wait for your payroll software to catch up and put those changes in to change the employment allowance from £4,000 to £5,000. So we know that from the 6th of July, we are going to have a new primary threshold. So from the 5th of up to the 5th of July, the primary threshold is going to be annually 9,880, which is £823 a month or £190 a week. That is going up to 12,570 a year or 1,048 or 242 a week, which mirrors the income tax threshold. Directors' national insurance is paid on an annual basis. So for the 22-23 tax year, directors will be able to earn £11,908 before they have to pay any Class 1 national insurance. And that is based on 13 weeks, so from the 6th of April to the 5th of July, so 13 weeks at the allowance of 9,880, and then the remaining 39 weeks at 12,570, which then means that directors benefit is in the director's threshold is in line with employees. And even those directors who choose the alternative method of calculating national insurance, there is still that requirement for a recalculation right at the end on the last payment, which would then bring back down to this threshold of 11,908 just to make sure that they've paid the right amount. Now, one thing that has come to light when all the instructions came out about the FUST, and when we were all double checking with HMRC, is this really right about how to calculate the national insurance using the FUST? It also came to light that the way of rounding national insurance calculations has changed as well. So now, when calculating national insurance, if you've got the third decimal place is a 5, you would round down. And if the third decimal place is a 6, you would round up. It used to be that you rounded up from 5 upwards, and now it's just moved by 1 point there. Again, especially important for those of you who've got exams coming up and you will have to do all the manual calculations. So the earnings thresholds there, that hasn't changed, but you can just see the bottom section is that glaring new category for your FUST. So that annual threshold is £25,000, monthly it's £2,083, and weekly it's £481. Just a summary there of what all the NIC rates are going to be with the extra 1.25% added on. And just a reminder as well that it's not just class 1 that's going up, all rates national insurance are going up, so 2, 3, 4 as well. But class 1A and class 1B will also be payable at 15.05%, gone up from the 13.8%. Student loans now. 2 of the plan thresholds have been frozen. So we have an increase for plan 1, so that's gone up to 20,195, and we have an increase for plan 4, and that's gone up to 25,375. Other than that, plan 2 and postgrad stayed the same. National minimum wage, just a quick canter through that, just to remind you that the new rates come in for the first pay period after the 1st of April 2022. So it might be that it does actually start on the 1st of April, but it depends on your pay periods. Otherwise, it's the first period after that. And you must make sure that you retain records for 6 years instead of 3, because that's how far HMRC can go back for any investigation. Not to confuse the national living wage with the real living wage. Now, George Osborne played a blinder when he changed the name of the top rate of national minimum wage, and he changed it to national living wage. And there then became all sorts of confusion. The real living wage is voluntary, and it's a rate that is created by the Living Wage Foundation, who look at the amounts that people need to actually live, whether it's in London or whether it's in the rest of the UK, how much they need to be able to keep going. You'll see that it is significantly higher. If we go back to the national minimum wage, the national living wage is going to be £9.50 an hour. The real living wage is £11.05. But it's mandatory, it's voluntary. Employers sign up to this and say that they're going to be a real living wage employer. And if they are, they have 6 months in which to apply the rates. So they came out in November and they need to apply them by May if they want to continue being accredited as a real living wage employer. Common errors, salary sacrifice accounts for so many. Despite those lower earners being the ones who really need most of the benefits that you can gain from salary sacrifice, an employee is not allowed to sacrifice salary if it will take them below the national minimum wage rate for their age. And another big one is traveling between jobs. If you have one of those jobs that means that you travel from client to client to client, perhaps a carer or something, the time between each client is classed as working time, and often they're not paid for it as such. So let's look at statutory payments. We've got some changes on here as well. We still don't have the redundancy rates for Northern Ireland. Last year they published on the 1st of April, so I've perhaps got another week to go before they're out. But for England, Wales and Scotland, the redundancy rates have gone up there. Well, we go through them all, you can read them later. Statutory payment weekly rates, SSP is now £99.35 and the parental leave rates are £156.66. Just a reminder that the statutory payments for parental leave, so SMP, SPP, adoption pay, that kind of thing, they start on or after Sunday the 3rd of April, which is different from SSP, which changes on the 6th of April. So it's the first Sunday for parental leave, it's the 6th of April for sick pay. The recovery rates have not changed. That's your daily rates for SSP. Just wanted to mention about statutory parental bereavement leave and pay. I've already mentioned earlier on that social security regulations are different in Northern Ireland, and here's another example of how we've diverged. So the parental bereavement leave and pay came in Great Britain in April 2020. It didn't come in Northern Ireland. It is coming in Northern Ireland on the 6th of April. And to start with, it's going to mirror the Great Britain rules. So that's a day one right to at least 2 weeks leave if a child under 18 dies or it's a stillbirth after 24 weeks. There'll be a block of 1 or 2 weeks, so it's up to you. You can take 2 weeks together or 1 week here and 1 week there. And the reason for that, and the fact that you can take it up to a year later, is because what the government recognised was that actually you might want time off on the anniversary of the child's death. So potentially you could keep a week and use it as the anniversary comes up. Now, looking at that bullet where I've said it commences in Northern Ireland and it's expected to mirror GB rules, to start with, it is going to mirror GB rules, but Northern Ireland has taken it a step further. And what they have said is that they want to pay this for in the cases of miscarriage. The legislation still needs to go through and it still needs to be implemented, so we're not there yet, but moving forward they're going to be the first country in the United Kingdom that will pay statutory parental bereavement leave for miscarriages, not just stillbirths after 24 weeks, so keep your eyes on that one. Benefits in kind, just a little trot through here about what the new rates are going to be. So the multiplier for fuel benefit charge, so when fuel is provided for company cars, that's going up to £25,300. The van benefit charge is £3,600, and there is now no easement for zero emission vans. Company van fuel benefit charge is going up to £688. The advisory fuel rates in December, every single one of these rates changed. Every single one went up, reflecting the fact that oil and gas prices were rising massively. In March, only one rate has gone up, so that's the LPG rate for 1400cc cars, which has dropped from 9 pence to 8 pence. We all know that oil prices have gone absolutely through the roof now, especially with the war in Ukraine. So what happens with these in June, because advisory fuel rates are reviewed every quarter, so we expect the next rates to be published on the 1st of June. I cannot see any way that they're not all going to go up again like they did in December. I'm astonished that LPG has gone down. So we'll have to wait and see how we go for that. The authorised mileage allowance payments, the AMAPs, have been unchanged since April 2011. So for the first 45 miles, you can be paid from your employer up to 45 pence. We all know that fuel prices have gone up massively in the last 11 years, but yet these remain unchanged. Whether that stays the same or whether they will realise that these need to be altered, I do not know. But for the time being, no change for AMAPs. Beneficial loans, the interest rate for these has not yet gone up, so we still apply at a 2% rate. Again, you would think that that would go up as well because interest rates are rising. RTI, just a reminder of when you can or can't use an EYU. Some people have got it into the head that EYU cannot be used anymore. And that is the case for tax years moving forward, but you can only use an EYU for tax years that ended in April 2018. So you'd be as well just to keep hold of this slide. If you do need to amend a tax year, just have a look to see if you can use a year-to-date FPS, marvellous, because then it's all nice and easy. If you have to use an EYU, then sit down with a big pot of coffee and a big packet of biscuits and work out exactly how to do it. And don't listen to HMRC guidance that sometimes tells you, you know, to put the year-to-date figures on an EYU. If you do, you'll find yourself in a whole world of pain. Year-to-date figures only work for FPSs. Bank holidays and weekends, we've got Easter coming up and we've got the extra Jubilee bank holiday. So just a reminder that if you pay early on your FPS, you have to record the date as the date that you would have normally paid, the regular payment date. And especially if that happens over or around the start of the tax year, that's not a bank holiday, but if you do pay early for any reason around the start of the tax year, just make sure that you use the regular pay date in there. Otherwise, it throws everything out. And those are the bank holidays that we've got for 2022. In red, those are the ones that we've got for the Jubilee. Now you'll see that the late May bank holiday, which is always the last Monday in May, that's been moved down to the end of that week, so that the bank holiday is now Thursday the 2nd of June and the Jubilee bank holiday is Friday the 3rd of June. So it's that weekend at the beginning of June that we've got a 4-day weekend. Pensions, no change on pensions. So the annual allowance remains at 40,000. The lifetime allowance at 1,073,100. Just notice here though, no change again, which is actually throwing things out a little bit in people's minds. The earnings threshold is £10,000, that's fine, but the lower limit of earnings has remained at 6,240. It normally tracks the LEL, and the LEL has gone up this year to 6,396, but the lower earnings limit for automatic enrolment hasn't gone up with it. It's stayed at the figure it was last year. So it's stayed at 6,240. So just remember that they're no longer in sync with each other. The upper limit for earnings, 50,270. So a look ahead at what is coming. State state pension age is currently 66. It's due to increase to 67 between 2026 and 2028. And then it's due to rise again to 68 between 2044 and 2046. However, as a result of the Pensions Act 2014, the government has to review state pension age every 6 years. So the latest review started just before Christmas, and it has to report by May 2023. Now, originally, the review was asked to consider whether that increase to age 68 gets brought forward. So people have to wait longer for the pension sooner than was originally planned, because the government has got this huge debt because of COVID, and we've got to start paying it off. So one way to do it is to make people wait longer for the state pension. However, since the review was instigated, this most recent one, the Office for National Statistics have published a report that says that life expectancy rates are dropping. So the consequence of that is that the government potentially won't need to pay pensions out for as long. So now there is a suggestion that they will not need to bring forward that retirement rise to age 68. Potentially, they're going to leave it exactly where it is. And it'd be very interesting to see which way this one's going to go. And most of the people on this call will be affected by this at some point or other, if that pension age keeps getting higher, or if it stalls, or if it starts coming down. Very interesting to see where that one goes. Staying with pensions, because of automatic enrolment, where more and more people are enrolled into a workplace pension, as they move from job to job, then usually don't take the pension with them. So they're ending up with all these little pension pots all over the place, and they're not going to know what they've got, how much they've got, or when it's due to pay out. So there is a call for a pensions dashboard. The government has always thought this is a marvellous idea, but they've not got the money to do it. So they've said, yes, we'll do it, but the pension industry is the one that has to pay for it. All the technicalities and intricacies of that have been resolved, and work is now underway on the pensions dashboard, and we're well forward with it. There will be an independent dashboard first of all, so that's like the government one, if you like, and that's going to be provided by the Money and Pension Service. And what that will do, be linked to your national insurance number, and everybody can go on and have a look, and it will show all the different pension pots that you've got, what you've got, where you've got, which company it's with, and when it matures, or when you can access it. After that, at least a year after that, pension providers themselves will be able to have pension dashboards as well, but they will have to do the same thing. They will still have to show the pension pots that you've got with other pension providers, not just with them. And we should be able to start thinking of a pensions dashboard as business as usual from 2024. So within 2 years, we should be able to see what pots you have there. So what else is on the horizon? Well, let's look at that top one, Plan 5 student loan. It was announced earlier this year in February that there will be a new student loan. It will be available to people who take out a student loan from September 2023. As it stands at the moment, anyone who takes out a new student loan, I'm leaving postgrad loans on one side. This is your undergraduate student loan. If you remember, we just looked at the threshold, it's 27,295. So you don't start making repayments on a Plan 2 loan until you earn above 27,295. And the repayments continue whilst you're above that threshold, either until the loan's paid off or for 30 years. And if the loan isn't paid off at the end of 30 years, then it's written off. You don't need to pay it back anymore. The changes that are coming in for borrowers who take out a loan from September 2023 are that the threshold will be reduced. So it's going to be £25,000. So the threshold for Plan 5 will be below a Plan 2 loan. So you start to pay it back earlier. And the repayment period is 40 years rather than 30 years. So an extra 10 years of repaying it before what's left of that debt is written off. Remember as well, someone could take out a loan in September 2023 and then drop out. So it could potentially become into repayment from April 2024. We'll obviously get a lot more information about that nearer the time. We've also got some areas here on the slide that would have probably already come in if it were not for COVID, that took up all parliamentary time, and so the Parliament didn't have time to look at the required legislation for carers leave. Carers leave is for the likes of me. So we already have leave, parental leave, so people who need to, take care of children, they get off school for whatever reason, or take children to various appointments and things. But there's nothing for someone like me who has to do exactly that, but for my mum. So carers leave is for people who have to still care for people, but they're not children. The principles will still apply. It will be a day one right for employees. It will be unpaid leave, a week of unpaid leave each year. We are waiting for parliamentary time, so it's not going to come in this coming year. Hopefully it'll come in the following year. Neonatal care leave and pay. This is for people who have a baby that is in a neonatal unit, and it follow the eligibility tests, follow those for maternity leave and that kind of thing. But neonatal care leave and pay is added on to the end of maternity leave or paternity leave. So they take it at the end, because sometimes babies are in these neonatal care units for so long that the maternity leave is nearly used up even before the baby comes home. So this is to add onto the end of that. It can be for up to 12 weeks. So that's 1 week of leave for every week the child is receiving neonatal care. It's likely the leave will have to be taken in blocks of a week, but again, we're still waiting for the legislation to go through that will bring that in, and then we'll get more detail about it then. We looking now at receiving tips. This has gone on for years, hasn't it? The evidence of poor tipping practices: either tips are left and the employer just keeps them for himself, tips are left and the employer uses that to make up national minimum wage. We've had two different elements, two different ways that this has come through. We've had an MP who sponsored a private members bill nicknamed the Tips Bill, but it's also forms part of the employment bill, which is a much larger overarching piece of legislation. Either way, the intention is that employers will not be able to do that, and tips that are left in good faith, as for good service, must go to the employees directly. Again, we're waiting for that legislation to come in. It's likely start of next year, probably. Extended protection and rights for employees. Funnily enough, I was just listening to something on the TV this morning, because we know, don't we, that P&O ferries have now admitted that they broke the law, but there are a lot of workers who don't have protection, don't have a right of recourse against their employer. There is no statutory body that can enforce workers' rights. We have HMRC that enforces national minimum wage. We've got the Gang Masters Authority, and we've got the Agency Workers Standards. But other than that, there's no body that holds employers to account, or bad employers to account, and issues penalties and whatever. And the intention is that there will be an overarching body that will enforce employees' rights, so that employees don't have to either take their employer to an employment tribunal or just live with it, because those are the only options available to them. That again forms part of the employment bill. And again, that employment bill, which has got so many different elements, flexible workings in there in the employment bill as well. We're still waiting for that parliamentary time to get that in. We've got a question: do we have a prospective date for neonatal leave and pay? I'm sorry, no, we don't. It's literally just waiting until Parliament gets time in its timetable to start debating it. We thought that parliamentary time was going to get freed up as we came out of COVID and life started to return more to normal. We thought that there'd be more parliamentary time to start catching up, but of course the war in Ukraine has now played a part in impacting how parliamentary time is taken up, so we just don't. It won't be before April 2023, I don't think now. And finally, we've got solving the pensions tax relief anomaly. You have two ways of getting pensions tax relief. Either you have a net pay arrangement, which means that the pension contribution is taken off first before the remaining earnings are taxed. Or you have a relief at source arrangement, which means that the your earnings are taxed and then the pension contribution comes off, and then the government puts the tax relief directly into the pension pot. Net pay arrangement works fine for people who do pay tax, who earn over that tax threshold, but for anybody who doesn't, they do not really receive any tax relief at all. And finally, the government has accepted that this is wrong, and so they are going to correct that pensions tax relief anomaly. So through tax year 24-25, anybody on a net pay arrangement pension scheme who hasn't paid any tax because they're below the threshold, the government will then look to see what pension contributions they've made and top up that missing tax relief and put that in their pension pot, and that will happen at the beginning of the 25-26 tax year. It's a long time to wait, but at least they have now decided that they're going to act upon it. And that is the end of the session today. Whistle stop tour through everything that's gone on. I think I've caught all the questions on the chat box as we've been going through. I don't think I have missed any, but if we do have any more questions, either unmute yourself and ask, or put it in the chat box, or send me an email after, because my email address is in the chat box. It's helen@mbkbgroup.com. Any questions, anybody? No, I don't think we've got any questions. So in that case, I will thank you all very much for joining me this morning. I will add the recording of this session to the MBKB website. If you go to the MBKB website, on the homepage, click on the link that says for information, and then go to payroll resources, and you'll see all the payroll resources there. There's also the updated revised payroll fact card that we scurried about and updated yesterday with the new employment allowance rates and NI rates. and other bits and pieces on there too. But I will thank you for your time and wish you a very happy remainder of Friday, and have a great weekend, everybody. Take care. Bye bye.